So a lot of people think hit points are weird, and it's not hard to see why. They're one of the most blatantly artificial elements of D&D. Chances of failure and success, being paralyzed or blinded, those things all exist in the real world. Even if you don't know the game's rules, you can still picture them in your head and get the basic concept. But hit points, what are those? If you're a normal human being, then you know what hit points are. They're video game health. You take damage, you lose them, and when you run out, you drop. But if you're one of those weirdos who views D&D as more of a simulation or storytelling vehicle, you've probably spent at least an hour you should have spent working, sitting at your desk wondering what hit points actually model within the narrative of the game. So, maybe you start digging around and realize that everybody seems to have a different answer. And eventually, you realize the only way you're going to get an answer you're happy with is if you come up with one on your own, and before you know it, you're left with a small essay worth of thoughts on the subject, and at that point, you have to commodify it. Otherwise, your wife is going to have serious questions about why you spent all day at the computer and somehow wrote 0 pages for your next book. So anyway, today I'm going to solve hit points. Roll up a sheet. You would think this would be a really easy problem to solve. Hit points are a product of the rules, so surely the answer to the question is hit points are whatever the rules say they are. So we crack open our player's handbooks to Chapter 9, page 196, where we find the following.
Hit points represent a combination of physical and mental durability, the will to live, and luck. Creatures with more hit points are more difficult to kill. Those with fewer hit points are more fragile.
Mystery solved, right? Hit points are just an amalgamation of a bunch of different things that all come together to make something harder to kill. Except if hit points are a combination of a bunch of different factors, why is Constitution the only ability score that gets you more of them? Why not Wisdom or Charisma, the stats closely related to willpower? And why is it that caster classes innately get less than marshals? Do wizards just have less will to live than fighters? Is it purely for balance reason because this is a game first and a simulation distant fifth? No! It's clearly because the rules are wrong. And in actuality, hit points are literal durability. You see, for the typical average ordinary person in D&D, here represented by the commoner stat block, hit points are decently accurate as a model of physical durability. See, the average commoner has 4 hit points, with a max of 8 before it's no longer a commoner. When we take a look at what kind of durability this gives us, we're left with a surprisingly accurate to life model. For example, a typical punch from someone with a commoner's strength deals 1 damage, meaning it takes about 4 solid hits to lay out the average Joe. Going off of the description of class features and feats, a punch from somebody with martial arts training or bar brawl experience can potentially do the job in 1 go. And that basically checks out, at least to the mind of someone like me who has never actually experienced physical violence except for that one time. But cold clocks to the face aren't the end of hit points basically making sense. Bearing in mind that it's possible to roll all 1s on damage dice, here's a list of things that are potentially lethal to the average person in D&D, while still being technically survivable. Getting stabbed, getting shot, being struck by lightning, falling from a 10-foot drop, falling from a 30-foot drop, being buried in an avalanche, being hit by a tsunami, exposure to toxic gas, being set on fire, getting attacked by an animal, ingesting poison. And that all tracks! For commoners, hit points as literal durability makes sense. It's not a perfect system, you can step on 4 thumbtacks and die, but it holds up as well to scrutiny as anything else in this game. Things you would expect would probably kill you, probably would. Things that aren't necessarily life-threatening, aren't. And anything you think would be an absolute no-question instant kill, like getting dunked in lava or, I don't know, being chewed by the moon, is an instant kill. It's also way more concrete and easy to imagine than being told by the rules that you hit someone, but then hit points saying actually it was really a near miss, but it still damaged them. So taking hit points literally is just way better for suspension of disbelief. Except here's a list of some things a 5th level character can theoretically survive. Being stabbed 40 times, being struck by lightning 20 times, standing in the epicenter of a fireball, standing in the epicenter of a meteor impact, a 100-foot drop, a 200-foot drop, getting crushed by compacting walls, being submerged in lava, having a castle dropped on your head, being chewed by the moon. And that's just extremely lucky 5th level characters. If we look at high level characters, they don't even have to be lucky. They can comfortably survive this, walk away from it, and keep fighting, probably winning. A 5th level barbarian doesn't even need luck to survive a 200-foot fall, just rage. A 20th level barbarian can be chewed by the moon, spat out, burn on re-entry for a bit, impact to the ground at terminal velocity, and still walk away. So we all agree that no combination of luck and will to live is explaining that, at least not consistently. But even physical durability mixed in feels like it's pushing it for stuff like this. You know, lava is lava, the moon is the moon, and we are meat. So, how? You know, this can't be a new problem. I have an idea. We must consult
the ancient texts.
And by that I mean previous edition handbooks. So let's start with the Dark Horse. What's 4th edition got to say about hit points?
Hit points measure your ability to stand up to punishment, turn deadly strikes into glancing blows, and to stay on your feet throughout a battle. Hit points represent more than physical endurance. They represent your character's skill, luck, and resolve. All the factors that combine to help you stay alive in a combat situation.
Okay, that's pretty similar to what we get in 5th edition. Hit points are still being called a combination of stuff, but they're throwing in skill as an explanation. And they're explicitly calling out what a character taking damage is doing. They're withstanding hits, rolling with them to make them less direct, and staying on their feet. That's interesting. Still doesn't explain this.
And as you can see, I am not dead!
But it is interesting. What else we got? 3.5, what's your take?
Hit points mean two things in the game world. The ability to take physical punishment and keep going, and the ability to turn a serious blow into a less serious one. For some characters, hit points may represent divine favor, or inner power. When a paladin survives a fireball, you will be hard-pressed to convince bystanders that she doesn't have the favor of some higher power. You will be hard-pressed to convince bystanders that she doesn't have the favor of some higher power.
Oh my god, I get it now. It was so obvious. Hit points are plot armor! That last bit right there spelled out what should have been obvious, but it took 3.5 specifically calling out feats of unbelievable survival for me to get it. Hit points are just the story, or the game's way of saying you don't die yet because you're special to the plot. It's a narrative device. When you have a lot of hit points, you're not worried about anything, just like how in the start of an action movie, you don't really expect the first bit of danger characters run into to hurt them. Yeah, and you lose those hit points, your effectiveness doesn't go down, but the sense that you are getting closer to real harm does go up. You're starting to get a little further into the plot, and that feeling of being too early in the story for someone to die is starting to go away. And then you hit 0, and after a whole movie of stuff getting thrown at the hero, something serious finally lands, and boom, he goes down. Yes, I've solved it. Now we can... Okay, wait, what about healing spells? Because it's called Cure Wounds, not Cure Narrative Tension, but we've already established that hit points can't be completely literal, so every instance of damage can't be a physical wound, so what are you curing? How do you know when they need cure? How... It was at this point I became aware of two things. Firstly, that despite my best efforts, I'd been unable to come up with a single, unified explanation of what hit points represent. Literal durability broke down at the highest and lowest levels of the system. Plot armor felt less specific and concrete the more I pulled at its strings. Secondly, it was 2 in the afternoon and I still hadn't eaten yet because I forgot to eat before I started writing this and lost all track of time, like I always do. I should probably eat breakfast. Or maybe it's lunch now? It's the first meal I've had today, but it's the middle of the day. We'll call it brunch. Children's cereal for brunch. A good decision, made by someone who is in control of their life. But in the midst of this very good decision, an epiphany struck. To get the right answers, you must ask the right questions. And I'd been asking the wrong one. Instead of asking, what are hit points, and trying to find a single, unilateral explanation, what if instead I asked, what can hit points be? What if, instead of any one thing, hit points were sort of a combination of different things, you know? a malleable amalgam explanation to let them be whatever the story needs to be, like a mix of luck and skill and physical endurance and supernatural defense. Yeah, we want hit points to have this neat explanation within the fiction of the game, as if their existence hurts the verisimilitude of the world, but the truth is, their vague explanation is a service to the fiction. If they represent no one thing, they can represent anything you want. You can hand-wave them, or you can weave them into the reality of the game, make them a magic force field, or bad aim on the bad guy's part, or anything. Use any explanation you want for hit points. Use no explanation. Whatever fits the story for your game. Just keep them above 0 and have a good time. Yeah. I'm satisfied with that conclusion that I came up with entirely on my own. Oh. Well, I promised myself a shorter video, and turns out I wasn't lying to myself. Full disclosure, I had most of this done in like a week, but then I got super busy with book promotion stuff and work, so it didn't get finished until now. Speaking of, I wrote a book. It's called The MET in a Tavern, and it's officially out. There's links in the description if you want to check that out. Otherwise, I am still new at this, so if you want to support the channel and don't feel like spending money, the like and subscribe buttons are always free, and they are very much appreciated. And if you're not doing anything else, hop into the comments and tell me how you justify hit points. That's all for now. Send this to your friends, your party, and your DM, and I'll see you next time. Bye.